And I actually had the same thought before I came up, is that the civic and citizen-led movement is one side, and what happens inside the guts of government is another side of the same coin. So I think very much it's part of the same challenge, and I would say they're very complementary. In other words, one succeeding is very much dependent on the other, and vice versa. So what I want to do is bring you the perspective of a technology company, a startup, that is working to help government deliver better digital services. And to give you a little bit of background, we started the company 2 years ago after the Presidential Innovation Fellowship, which was President Obama's initiative to bring technology people inside of government and modernize government. And I think it's important to point out that we believe that the tools of technology and the tools of startups are useful for addressing the really hard problems of service delivery, social services, and everything else that government does. And I think the second belief is really that these are problems worth working on. So I think that's where the overlap comes in with everyone I've talked to over the last few days here who's working on the same problem from the other side, which is that the public sector has a role to play. The public sector functioning well and allowing for innovation and change is very important to the well-being of society. And I think actually that's probably less controversial here than it is in the US in a sense, because you know, in the technology community, there's a big bias against government in a lot of ways. And you know, the sense that we can live off in space or you know, in the ocean and these sorts of things. But there's, you know, the message I want to bring is that there's a increasingly significant group of technologists and of activists who are standing up and saying that government actually is important to work on in the same way that every other industry is. So that's just a bit of the background. So what motivated us to start the company? We saw 4 trends happening. The first is that citizens want to interact with government via the web, and they want a great experience. This seems somewhat uncontroversial in a way, but I think you know, what we experienced when we were inside government and also as citizens is not that great experience. So we saw the experience that we all have, you know, with our consumer technology and the experience of interacting with the public sector diverging dramatically. And we wanted to do something about that. The second is that the people who are at the front lines of government, who are the managers who are, you know, managing a social service program or collecting data from police departments, they want powerful software without intermediaries. And what that means is that they don't want to rely on external consultants. They don't want to rely on internal IT departments who are not fully aware of their needs. So they want something they can hold and use themselves. The third is that government is becoming a platform. So I think this is sort of, in some ways, a metaphor, but in some ways it's also coming true. And again, that's where I think the tie to some of the great civic projects we heard today. Government should have an underlying source of data, identity. They should build services on top of it, but they should also use that platform as a way to engage external partners, and recognizing that solving the hard problems require engagement with a much wider range of players, universities, nonprofits, new companies that aren't the traditional companies that engage with government. and that I think is becoming more and more of a realization, so government needs tools to do that. The fourth is that the way government thinks about data security and procurement is changing. So I would add, it's changing slowly. These are really important topics: data security, the protection of data, data breaches. All of these are problems to take seriously, but often government doesn't have the understanding of cloud technology or latest standards, industry standards, and therefore holds new companies sometimes to the same standards as the IBMs of the world. So in the US, for example, to get through the data security requirements requires many, many years and many millions of dollars at the federal level. Luckily, there's some other ways around it. And procurement, of course, being the marketplace for government technology. So who can stand up and say, hey, I have an idea for how you can solve this problem? Traditionally, this has been a very narrow group of companies who are better at writing proposals than they are at building software, and that maybe shouldn't be the case. So with a look at those trends, we built a product called Screen Door. So Screen Door is a web application. It's really a platform that transforms how government works and collaborates. And I'm going to give a couple examples here of how Screen Door has been deployed in practice, and also highlight a couple of the key features that we built with those trends in mind. Before I jump into that, I think it's important to get a little bit of context of what your day-to-day life is like if you are someone working in government, managing a program, and what software you currently have to choose from. There's sort of two options, and I think this is largely true here based on what I've seen so far as well. The first is a very, very manual process, so PDFs, email, Excel. We can call that the killer apps of government from time past. And these are very easy to stand up initially, but have enormous marginal cost for each implementation. And you have many, many smart people in government stuck doing manual processes that they should be spending their time on better things. And they want to. The second is much harder to implement. It's sort of a set of 1990s software. Two examples are SharePoint and Laserfiche, and these are desktop-based systems. And so they require lots of consultants and lots of customization, and the business models of these companies, in fact, are based on those needs. And so we wanted to play in this space where it was both easy to implement and manage, and also available on the web and accessible and reusable. So that was sort of the motivation for developing Screen Door. And we're currently in several dozen government agencies, mostly in the US, cities. We have states. We also have federal agencies. And we've done a little bit internationally as well. In fact, here in Switzerland is one of our latest deployments with LEAP and the government of Switzerland, which I'll talk about. But we're really excited for what this can do across a broad range of government agencies. So now into what does the product look like and feel like. There's really 3 or 4 core elements here. So first is a collaborative database. So speaking to the fact that most of these processes are stuck in email or other outdated systems, we wanted to start with a shared space where people can manage information that's coming in. And so what you have here is the ability for teams to be assigned to information, to create workflows, to really just get a bird's eye view of all the information that you have as an agency. And so what we're doing with the California Department of Justice, you see search warrant notifications. We're collecting information from police departments that is mandated by law has to be collected. And they're really lowering the barrier by making it easier for that information to be collected at the state level and managed. And the result of that is sort of a second order advantage, I think, of fixing the core pipes of data, right? So, and this again speaks to where like the citizen government overlap happens. And what California Department of Justice is doing is after they collect those warrant information, they're actually pushing that via an API, so there's no people in between, to the open data portal called Open Justice. And this really speaks to the last talk we saw, which was, you know, getting information into the public hands. And we believe that instead of extracting it from hard to use systems afterwards, you should create and collect that data in a flexible, modern standard from the very beginning, and make it in the context of a system that solves larger operational problems for the organization. The third bit is custom workflows. So it's a little hard to see, but really automating exactly who will do what in a process. So a lot of government processes require 6 or 7 different groups approving something or moderating, or maybe there's a building inspection based on a permit application. And all of that is currently done very, very manually. And for people managing those processes, it's very difficult for them to see where that stands in the process. So it's really an accountability and a efficiency challenge. And so we're working with the US Department of Health and Human Services, which is actually the largest federal agency in the US, to automate the way that they select and place staff and candidates and in international positions. So again, you know, a really core fundamental thing that they do every day and every year, and really just dramatically reducing the time it takes to implement that program. We also have a drag and drop form builder. And this is really basic, but also important. Again, the context here is forms are either done manually or forms are done through hard to use legacy systems where consultants sort of have to hold your hand. And in practice, we see this all the time where a change has to happen to a form or a new form needs to be issued, and there's a very long lag, and the person in charge of that project can't control the information. So we want to, again, get it into the hands of the frontline folks who have a job to be done. And that's actually what we're doing here with the Swiss federal government, giving feedback on draft legislation. It's a pilot project, the name of which in Swiss German I can't pronounce. Maybe you can help me, Hannes. That's what I was going to say. Right, so allowing different constituency groups to give feedback on laws, which right now is really done with paper, and getting that into a system where you can do analysis on it. You can understand what is the summary of how people feel about a law without manually having to go through that data, and of course, you know, publishing that publicly when appropriate. And the final sort of large sort of solution we're trying to develop and sort of functionality that we think is really important to this puzzle is the idea of having applications that sit on top of Screen-Door. So one of the first ones we're creating is called Dispatch. So Dispatch is now going live with the city of Philadelphia, and it's actually a procurement portal. So they want to find ways to let small companies bid on projects for the city under a certain limit, price limit, and allow them to find those opportunities quickly, bid on them quickly, be awarded quickly, and implement quickly. So this is fundamentally important for the type of solutions that government is going to have, and who's going to be able to participate in that level of problem solving. And sort of this is the beginning of, I think, a much wider set of tools that will sit on top of the core functionality. I think one thing you'll maybe observe is that that set of functionality, forms, workflows, a collaborative database, these are very fundamental, basic things in a lot of ways. They've been part of software in the enterprise, you could say, and of course in government for many, many years, as long as there's been sort of computers, essentially. But so the idea really is to identify those core pieces that are at the core of a wide set of problems, and then allowing developers, people in government, and others to work with us to develop specific, very targeted, narrow solutions on top of that. So we built Screen Door because we believe that most functions in government have a significant percentage of those core functionalities, and the rest we can use open, modern, flexible, collaborative tools to build on top. So it really is about lowering the barrier to building those things on top with developers, including, I think the first batch will actually be here in Switzerland. We did a demo in the new Leap office in Bern, and working with some software developers there on building that. Not going to go through all the details here, but for the geeks in the audience, some specs. It's a cloud-hosted system on Amazon Web Services. It's a Ruby on Rails application. We can talk about that in detail if you're interested. But one of the big things we want to announce now is actually an initiative to really more broadly bring Screen Door to other countries and other places. We really believe that every government in the world should be able to take advantage of this innovation and build on it in ways that are specific and narrow to their needs. And so we're actually expanding now, both in Switzerland and in other parts of the EU, to host data locally. And that's partly because many governments have requirements that data should be kept in country, which is completely reasonable. And it's also because we want to get closer to problems that are in different parts of the world. So I guess the takeaway here is that it's not just that if you're in government, your staff want powerful, customized, beautifully designed software. It's that the entire approach to building these digital services will be completely different in the future. And that's in all the ways that we discussed, in terms of engaging multiple partners and external partners, in terms of lowering the barriers to innovation and new services, and in terms of getting more startups, more companies involved in solving the hard problems of government. And so, the future is about transforming how specific government agencies work. But I think, coming back to the beginning, it's also really about restoring trust in government and how we sort of collectively get to a point where the core functions of government work as well as other sectors that we take for granted all the time. And that, the commercial and other enterprises, government can be just as effective as the rest of them. So with that, here's far too many ways that you can reach us. We have a podcast, we have a newsletter, you can do a demo, and we'd love to chat more. Thanks.